Welcome to the 5/16 EDSC meeting. Call order. Did anybody have a chance besides Jamie to look at the minutes?
I looked at
Okay, well, I'm just
and I
asking.
move that
Jamie
we
made
accept them
comments.
as written.
Okay.
Okay.
There we
Second.
go.
Yeah.
I got it.
Very good.
Did you have comments, Jamie?
Apparently.
Did you send
No,
them?
yeah, you did. They were sent to you, like that day that you sent them.
Got the
Okay.
one, yeah, I'm good.
And I must have changed.
I'm assuming you did.
I didn't read,
Yeah.
there were not, there, I didn't receive a revised.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Just a couple like typos stuff, right?
Yeah, right, because you.
What?
Yeah.
No, your computer, Josh, blame it on your computer.
You put me in there twice, under Carson, and there was like an incomplete thought of a Pioneer landscape also, something.
Okay.
Oops.
I didn't mind it too, twice, so it's fine. Didn't bother me.
Well,
Actually, I may have made number 7. Let me go.
well, there's no public speak while Josh is looking at that, and there's no, Carol's not here yet, unless you want to keep speaking for it.
Yeah, so Pestlin just told me, they're just going, cultural chaos is June 10th, and
Oh, yeah.
they're doing the planning for that, and everything is good, but she's up to her ears and just doing all the work to get it ready. But she's not supposed to be here today.
Entrenched in chaos, we like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Planning department, not much going on. Planning board still, have a couple of, zoning amendments going through, for public hearing on June 6th. One to create zoning for the seasonal cottages, and the other for a change to the medical marijuana, ordinance with regard to the facility hours. And also on June 6th, there'll be a discussion on recreational marijuana.
Wait just a second. The medical marijuana,
The slight, a zoning amendment to amend the hours, facility hours for medical,
yep,
seasonal cottages.
and the recreational,
It's a discussion on recreational marijuana
okay.
and zoning for seasonal cottages. And that's June 6th.
Okay, back to the minutes. City planner Jamie Webb. Okay, that's only listed once.
No, it says city planner Jamie Webb and city planner Jamie Webb, Jessica Allen.
Okay, well, this just says Jeff. That it'll only list once.
So then this must have been, you corrected it and then you
Yes, I
didn't send it out
corrected,
again.
yes. So,
So, I'll move that we, will prove that Josh has corrected minutes that are in the computer.
second.
Aye.
Third.
All right, thanks. Okay, I'm gonna jump to number 8. Dave, did you have anything to
No,
report on that? Okay.
nothing, I haven't
Yeah, okay.
completed that. I
Yeah.
intend to put together folders for everybody and.
Yep, that's okay. So, I jump back with the number 6. I'd like to just get the committee's, the members' attitude about housing in general for one thing. I know we've had, the last 2 meetings, we've talked a lot about it, and they've been pretty, vibrant discussions. And then I just wanted to just kind of reassure myself that people thought that housing was important in economic development in general, not, necessarily, And then what do people feel about increasing, one way or another, housing in the downtown business or the highway business districts? The reason why I left out neighborhood business, it has a slight difference than HB and DB in that first floor units are allowed. And that district is an example of the argument against allowing first floor units in DB and HB, because like my brother and I did it, we have a building across from the old French church, 1618 Pleasant Street, we just went apartments. We didn't even try to do any kind of commercial, because we didn't have to. So that's living proof. But I don't think that if we were to go forward with some kind of housing, some kind of change to housing, that I don't think the idea would be to be like neighborhood business necessarily. Or there'd have to be I was gonna say caveat, there'd have to be a restriction that a certain percentage has to be commercial or something, you know, I just speaking very broadly, in order to, you know, we wanna avoid circumventing what the purpose of, or what the goal of business is. So I kinda wanna know what people's feelings are on what we've talked about with, you know, accessory apartments, studio apartments in the back, or even a few first floor apartments. I mean, I'm babbling. Me, the Hurry Scurry building to me I don't see a loss in not going residential.
So,
That very specific building.
agreed. So let me just go back to where you started, Dave. I definitely see housing as a key component of economic development. If you don't have housing in your community, nobody new is moving in, nobody new is buying your products or services, and that can become very stagnant. Not to mention the growth that the city needs in tax revenues or what have you for new housing developments. So with that said, I personally believe it can be a trigger, it can be a component, it can be a catalyst for economic development, more housing, more people living in your community. There's a lot of different components to that. There's, you know, the whole end-of-life concept, the whole independent assisted nursing care, that concept, like a Lathrop or a Loomis. There's the concept of over 55 that's out there. There's the concept of you know, just apartments too. I mean, people look through East Hampton and say, wow, we have a lot of apartments. Try to find one right now. You know, we
Yeah.
talked about this last meeting. I don't know how many vacancies you have, but you can count them on one hand.
Right.
So, so when new people aren't moving in your community or new developments aren't being created, I think that can, you know, have a drag on economic development. With that said, I've been a proponent, and I know no one's gonna look at zoning. I'm not trying to put Jamie on the spot here, but no one's gonna look at a zoning change, I don't think, for one building.
Right.
But I'm, you know,
No, we know.
you know what, there's nothing wrong with a little civil disobedience once in a while.
But we did kind of recently, right, the building at the end of Cottage Street.
Well, that was bringing it, because it was on the, it was on
Yeah,
the zone,
I
it
know.
was on the line between it was not spot zoning, that was, you know, if you're looking at something like that at the end of Cottage Street, or the one on Main Street that flipped from DB to R5 and then back to DB,
Yeah.
those are not considered illegal, because
Yeah.
they're not.
On the border.
But if you look at where we have the neighborhood business district of, on Glendale, that one little parcel, that is considered
There's
spot
Carol.
zoning.
I did.
And
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the appetite would be for the downtown. I know, we all know the history, I think, why that restriction went in place in the
Yeah.
first place. It wasn't because people were trying to promote business.
First
It's
floor
because-
apartment.
First floor apartments.
Right.
They weren't trying to say, we need first floor apartments for business. It was more of a deterrent that business owners were converting storefronts to apartments, and they were looking pretty lousy. So I'm wondering if it's simple
Yeah.
enough to simply
Yeah.
say
Oh, yeah.
that
I know you're.
first floor
There's still
housing in
there.
the business district would be allowed with new construction. Is it that simple? Does that do enough to say new construction only
Mhm.
allows for first floor apartments?
What?
I have put a lot of thought into this,
Yeah.
and I think that it's important we don't have a lot of like downtown for strolling, storefronts, all that kind of stuff. So and currently at the end of Cottage Street, there are some houses there, some of them are businesses, you know, and it's kind of a neat look, but Union Street, for instance, It seems to me, I mean, I think it would be best to have businesses at the sidewalk level, at least in the front, apartments behind, and maybe even something, as I mentioned before, like Eastworks Studio, live-in studios, however, so it'd be a storefront, they live in the back, one rent, one whatever. I
Yes.
think it would accommodate
I
a
think
lot
if,
of artisans, in particular.
If a square footage number was in place, or,
That's right,
or,
yeah.
or a minimum requirements of storefronts, because like Mo said before, once you lose that storefront, you lose that storefront.
And I think it's important for the experience
and-
of walking downtown to
Yeah.
actually have that.
But on the other hand, another dress shop is closing in Northampton because they're going to online sales. So it's, I think it's holding on to a concept is a better idea than giving up on a concept.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean, it's like, give it a, you know, where there is still a little storefront, and if the storefront's small enough that it's more maybe affordable for a business to go in.
Yeah, I don't have a, for either of your comments, I don't have an opposition to that, but my sort of rhetorical question is, who are we saving it for? I'm not seeing,
Exactly.
I'm not seeing a lot of
Exactly.
businesses lined up coming to East Hampton. Cottage Street's about to have its 5th or 6th opening with the bike shop going out. So it's 5 or 6 empty
It's under
storefronts.
deposit though, I don't know the details,
Yeah.
and so I wonder
Just a
some,
Northampton business.
I wonder sometimes, you know, the one next to, where Bill Stepler used to be, the investment one, the one that was recently sold, sold. So maybe there's a little model that someone wants to, you know, buy it, be owner occupied, which kind of falls into studio back apartment too, you know. You know, in the whole downtown, if you had, you know, that kind of zoning where, you know, there was an apartment on the first floor, only, you know, say 40% in the rear, I don't know how many units you would add, maybe 10, you know, we're not talking hundreds.
Right.
But, you know, I just look at it as flexibility, and every little bit counts, that's all.
And just, like, you know, Nikki B fixing up those buildings
Oh,
in
yeah.
the corners, you know what I mean, it
Wow,
looks better
wow,
Yeah.
it's
to have
incredible.
a building occupied than unoccupied.
Yeah.
Well, and right, because he went totally against the grain, or the accepted wisdom of
Yeah.
just tearing them down,
Yeah.
and maybe have one building with, you know, I mean, I think he realized if he tore them down, he would have lost.
Square footage.
Yeah, but still, to go through it the way he did was not what is typically done by
No.
any stretch of imagination. And, so it's a good example. And then, but but you know, if you know those units, it is 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. I mean, they're, you know, which is good. It's okay.
There again, I believe, and if you've seen the rents on those, it's market rent,
Yep.
A little bit above.
maybe a little bit of both. And the last time I checked, I believe they're all rented.
Yeah.
So tell me there's not a pent-up demand when 7 more units go online in those 2 buildings. In the course of a year, 7
Yeah,
units
yeah.
go online, and they're rented as fast as they're done.
And the shitty one that my sister moved out of, to move into that one,
That's gonna
was
say-
rented the day that she left.
Yeah.
So-
That's the churn I'm talking about that we're missing. There's a small example of that churn that happens where someone moves out of one, opens one for someone else. But 7 units isn't gonna cut it necessarily.
Yeah.
Or 1 unit that your sister opens up isn't gonna cut it. The question I asked at the start of this discussion was, is there a way through zoning, through whatever, economic development, that we can encourage something at some part of that food chain that sparks that churn, that creates 20 units or 30 units that your sister vacated, or 20 or 30 units like Nick created, that artificially, if you will, because the economy's not doing it on its own,
Right.
artificially stimulates that churn somehow.
Can I just point out that, if you look at the map of East Hampton, you look at all of the zone, all the land that's zoned for residential, and all the land that's zoned for business, it seems short-sighted to me to start taking away business, the land that we have set aside for business, when you consider that other than the first floors, in all of our business zones, you can have residential.
Mhm.
In the neighborhood business district, like they've said, when we did allow first floor business, we don't have any, there's no businesses in those neighborhood business districts. And what I'm hearing is that there's like a desire to have flexibility in zoning. That there's always these edge cases, that there's some, storefront that keeps turning over, or there's a residence that just can't, that's vacant for whatever reason, falling down, hurry scurry, that there's these edge cases that like maybe there's a need for, or there's a desire for flexibility because there's a feeling that the ordinance, that the law is like too restrictive. So I don't know that if I'm hearing that correctly, but it seems a little like, do we want to start going down that road of having all of our downtown business districts residential,
Well, I think, Jamie, the quick answer is no. My comments I just made, my soapbox I just got off of, was more global, was more the view from 30,000 feet. When you look at the
Right.
various life cycles of a person looking for living space, when that comes to a screeching halt, like it has right now due to valid economic reasons, comes to a screech, there's no housing available on the market, there's very few apartments available, that whole churning process, that's always good for the economy, has come to a screeching halt, not just in East Hampton, everywhere probably. Is there a way that East Hampton, through some of its resources, is there a way we tweak some, I'm not even referring to downtown, that encourages some landowners to develop something into something that stimulates that churn? Whether it's over 55, whether it's one-bedroom apartment units, whether it's single-family housing developments, something that creates that churn that lets Casey's sister move from point A to point B and someone move out of mom's basement into this and starts that churn going.
Yeah, regarding, especially downtown business, but I'm sure the same would apply to highway business. Tom had just said, no, we're all kind of in agreement, more or less, that we don't want to change it to all residential first floor. City council isn't gonna buy it either, so I don't want to waste anyone's time.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was a small enough area to start, maybe we could draw out something, I'm just looking for flexibility. I didn't forward the article, I meant to, in California now, I guess, I don't know if it's statewide or countywide, but, the small house movement is really taking off from a zoning point of view. And and they're talking about small houses of being around 240 to 280 square feet. That's a 10 by 20. Yeah, no, that's really small.
Well, 280
building
feet
code
would be
requires.
about the smallest you could do it under mass code, because you have to have.
I understand that.
What's a typical trailer park?
I have no idea what it.
No, I understand that, but still,
500.
we have R35 where we could do a little bit bigger, and,
Yeah,
um,
no, I was not
yeah.
speaking of it in a restrictive way.
Right.
I'm saying the smallest house you can have and meet building code for hygiene, space, everything would be about 280 square feet.
Okay.
And we don't have we
A
don't
place
have
to
a,
put 'em.
no, well, we don't have a problem with small housing. Our
Yeah.
ordinance doesn't prohibit it. You can go as small as the state building
That's
code
right,
allows.
yeah.
The problem is, if it's on wheels, it's considered a trailer, or a trailer park, a trailer, and you can't live in a trailer.
Oh, no, these aren't on
And if they're
wheels.
not, if they're not on wheels, they have to connect to the city's stormwater and,
Yeah.
septic, and they have to have a foundation, and they have to have certain building code things, and so it,
But we have one residence per lot though at the moment, right?
well, you can have an accessory apartment,
Well, yeah,
and so like that.
I know, but I don't think people realize, or if it's, I think people still think of accessory as being attached or in-law. And I think, accessory could be
Well, I
in
mean,
the
the ordinance.
dooryard.
Right, then the ordinance does allow a detached accessory.
It does?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was recently changed about 2 years ago.
But to your point, Dave, if you took the average size, or the size of a building lot in East Hampton, and to your point, Dave, how many, if you could, how many
Houses.
say, use 300 for a round number, how many 300 square foot houses could you put on a building lot? Mathematically, I'm not
Right.
talking about zoning, just mathematically, how many could you put on there? And is there a way that allows that to happen?
Well, see, the other thing I'm looking towards.
Is it 10, is it 15, I don't know the number.
There
No,
would
it's
be-
limited to one accessory apartment
Right,
per,
and it
per
would-
lot.
It is
So
based
it
on
has
the
to be a
zone.
development, it has to be a development.
Correct.
Right.
But that doesn't have to be a development with roads, it could be a
Right.
development with sidewalks. That get you to these small units with a parking lot next to it.
Perhaps.
I park my car
Yeah.
here.
Well, see, the other thing is, like you mentioned earlier, new construction, and you talk about churn, you know, it's going back about 15 years, but in the 1996 rezoning, part of Maple Street was rezoned to a higher density.
Mhm.
I think it went from R10 to R5. And 3 houses were built just past the Plasky Club, and there was an uproar. You know, one house was torn down and 3 little houses were put in. I think that was a mistake when the city council reversed the zoning. Because those houses, the only problem I saw with those houses, and there was nothing anyone could do about it, is they weren't quite deep enough for my personal liking, but they've not caused blight, they're fine, they're, you know.
They fit the neighborhood.
Right, and so if you introduce some kind of zoning that is kind of hard to see, but that created activity, you know, and I would, you know, and I'm kind of looking towards that way. I don't see anything as being a panacea, or if just say today we're going to put downtown, we're going to put you know, studio housing, and you know, nothing's going to happen overnight.
Right, but I mean, if you said, you know, we wanna expand R5 zone to, you know, half of that new city neighborhood or something like that, you can do a mathematical, okay,
Yeah.
well, how many empty lots there are currently unbuildable under R10, and how many would be buildable under R5, and.
I guess the only drawback is there isn't very much open land in New City.
No.
But there are weird, like, little spaces that are.
But there's things,
House
that-
there.
there's a lot of puzzle pieces that you don't foresee. And I think the point is, you know, you put something in place that will allow someone to spend some money and do something.
Someone has a 11,000 square foot lot in the R10, if it got rezoned to R5, they have 2 building lots, they just have to subdivide.
Just back to your point real quick on downtown, when you said, obviously, if we said we wanted to go to first floor apartments, we're not gonna sell that to the city council. The studio piece, though.
I think we could.
That's saleable, right?
Yeah, I meant the most outlandish,
Right, right,
you know, first floor apartments, scurry, all that. I
right.
mean, but,
So what would it take to start moving that forward, at least with the studio apartment concept for downtown?
Once we
I
draft
mean,
it.
I think that once the EDIC is together on it, it's putting a proposal together and sending it to the planning board.
Yeah, I
The planning
think
board
once
will
you have
talk about
consensus,
it.
then we have to have a draft.
And then it's going to the planning board meetings and making sure that you know, because once the planning board gets it, it's in their court, so.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that part. I've done 3 zoning limits in town, you know,
Okay, let's jump to the chase. I'm making a motion that EDIC supports a draft to the planning board of a zoning change for downtown to allow for studio apartments on the first floor.
Not studio.
Whatever you wanna call it, sorry.
Yeah,
However you wanna word the motion.
well, 2, you know, details to be worked on.
Mixed use first floor.
Yeah.
mixed use, yes, mixed use
Can I-
first.
Yeah. You
I'm
can-
not voting automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personally and professionally, I'm opposed to it, if that makes a difference but I mean,
I
you
thought you
guys,
brought it up.
first floor,
First floor with the studio in the back.
I didn't.
Okay, I thought you did, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think I agree.
Okay.
But it's,
Sorry.
yeah, it's called mixed work, living space.
Right, so I have a I have a
I mean,
art
I
studio in
understand.
front with an
Well,
apartment.
you know, we did the easy part, we got the consensus, but, you know, like anything else.
Calling it,
Well,
and finding it.
I will work on a draft for next meeting, and, you know, and I have no shame, it'll be cut up.
Yeah.
No, because you gotta start somewhere, you gotta write, you know.
No, but I think we need to investigate particular lots that would be
Yeah,
applicable, otherwise it'd be sort of like, okay, yeah, well, we actually found 2 buildings that make sense, you know.
well,
but-
that's true too.
But it's
yeah.
like the building that the Razor's Edge is in, it's
Right.
a fairly decent
That's
size.
nice.
Yeah.
That would work.
Yeah.
You know, that they've had trouble getting that
Yeah.
2,000 square foot spot.
Right.
What if it was 1,000 and 1,000? Would
Yeah.
that be- You know, so that if we start to come up with examples,
Yes.
then maybe we could figure out what is
And
a selling feature or.
Yeah.
And that's one good example, Casey, and maybe the Hurry and Scurry building, if that option was available, maybe that entices the owner to say, yeah, I could do that, and put more apartments upstairs.
Right.
Right, because they could go, can they go 3 stories there?
Downtown business, I think it's 4 if you use smart growth.
So, again, they could
Yeah.
put several
Tiny
apartments in
one.
there, several
Yeah, it's pretty
layers.
So what are we doing, the motion?
Parking would.
I think the only
I didn't get a
motion,
second. Yeah, we didn't get a second.
I made a motion, but no second.
Before he goes second, said I want to.
Want it clear.
Clear.
Motion.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Well, let's make it clear again.
Make it clear what my motion is.
It's your motion.
I know, but I'm
I
not
mean,
using the
I
right
think that,
language, I'm not using the right language. I don't think, I basically,
I
I've
think
said.
that one should be tossed out and you start over.
A motion for a work,
Right.
living situation, first floor, living, work.
In
Well, I
downtown.
like, actually, what, yeah,
Yeah.
the mixed use,
Mixed.
first floor,
Yeah.
downtown business.
Got that, Josh? That's my motion.
Although
First floor, mixed use
is
downtown business.
Mixed
Not
use, you're
very
right.
clear. It's
Okay,
not
I see
very
what you're
clear.
saying, yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
motion to
Draft.
to look into it, to draft it, to research it more?
Yes.
I'm gonna have to draft a letter.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 The answer is
With a
yes.
multiple choice, you can't say yes for
Dave's
multiple
gonna work on a
choice.
draft to bring back to a subsequent meeting that
Yeah.
we're gonna look at.
How about this? I have an idea. I mean, I don't know if
Oh, no, go
it's
ahead.
a better idea. Maybe while you're working on a draft,
yeah,
you'll realize certain things and maybe even terminology expressions or
Yeah.
problems,
Yeah.
something.
Mhm.
How about if you make a draft and then I mean, you know what the idea is, and then maybe we can form a motion around what you come up with.
that's fine, I don't expect,
Okay, I withdraw my motion.
yeah.
Well, yeah, the motion should just be
Well,
David's
we can
gonna
just
work
say
on
we have
it.
Yeah.
consensus, right now, we can say we have
Work on that.
consensus to push this a little bit forward,
Yep.
upon a draft.
Yeah.
And then we'll flush it out some more.
And when we've agreed upon the language in a draft, we can vote that that's a draft, we move forward to the planning board.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
Make sense?
Okay, then just another issue on the over 55 is the 3 school buildings. You know, we talk about, I mean, I don't know if they're applicable to be zoned as over 55 or whatnot, but those seem like they're the only lots available, or few rare lots that are available, and they seem prime for
Yeah.
that kind of situation.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
goes back to our idea that we wanted to come up with future use for those buildings, but if we start to talk about what makes sense, and if we start to realize that there's a lack of housing, we can look into that information, put together that information as part of our proposal to the future use committee around those 3 buildings.
Hmm.
And, you know, like Jamie says, is keeping a certain amount of downtown business. You know, I don't know, Maple Street might be the only downtown business.
No,
don't
I
know.
think Maple Street's residential, but I don't know Center School.
Oh, but you know what I mean, I don't know particularly which would work well for business, or which would, even I think ideally they all work well for residents.
Yeah.
But
I
I
think
don't,
they're all zoned in the R, I think Center Pepin's R5 and Maple is R10.
so, yeah, I mean, Maple could probably be converted to an R5.
But it wouldn't matter, because if they're being converted from school to residential, they would be.
Yeah, Center
It
School,
would fall under multifamily.
Center School is R5.
And they would be, as existing buildings, they'd be exempt from, like, the setback and the
Well,
building
that's right.
heights and the.
But what about a tear down and a rebuild? What does that trigger?
Any new building has to meet the ordinance. So,
Right, but that could be housing, I guess is what I'm getting at. It could still be housing.
yeah, but it would be whatever the ordinance allows
Right.
currently. So a tear down would be, in the R5 would be a 5,000 square foot minimum lot, and you might get 4 or 5 lots out of where Center Pepin is.
Or again, some very nice, I mean, I hate to keep using Dave's property as an example, but the property that Dave did on, the development Dave did on Pleasant Street with the apartments across from the former church is very nice. You look at something like that could be 2 or 3 times as big as that on the Maple Street parcel, is pretty nice downtown. You know, garages, nice
Well, you could,
apartments.
or, you know, you have the St. Mike example in Northampton where they redid the school.
Right.
And there's nice
Yeah.
living
Yeah,
spaces.
Not very nice,
Yeah.
yeah, and they got waiting lists.
Where is this one?
Just past cereals, yeah.
Yeah, just beyond
Yeah,
Syria.
St. Mike's High
That's
School.
on
It's a high
both
school, yeah.
I just would, I would just hope that the future use committee ultimately won't fall into another trap of Parson Street.
Well, that's where I think that if we come up with some research about what the city's needs are, and we sort of beat them to the punch as far as a good plan and zoning compliances that says, okay, listen, we're able to get good, dense cluster housing, aesthetically pleasing, and keep parking for downtown, at least for the Maple Street. I'm really not familiar with the center street and the
Yeah,
and the
I have,
forest.
I've lobbied for years for the ultimate reuse of that to include some sort of municipal parking for Union Street, because it's lacking.
And it also
Well,
depends on what happens with.
Well, I sent a letter to the mayor today, but she responded and she says, you know, we're on board when it happens.
Yeah.
She was glad that we're, you know, we're thinking about it now.
Good.
And, you know, we'll see how that goes. But, so, okay, as far as today's meeting, I think we've hashed out the downtown business enough. You know, I'll work on a draft and, go from there.
And the reality of the businesses are mainly gonna be food, because that's what, I mean, I go to Brooklyn all the time, and the first floor businesses are pretty much restaurants, and you're lucky to get a hardware store, maybe one hardware store,
If they're-
walking distance.
I don't have much direct experience, I
Yeah.
know it through reading, but Brooklyn and Williamsburg are the case studies
Yeah,
for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's, you know, New York is such a, you know, Manhattan is priced out. There's even articles now about people that grew up in Manhattan and going to Williamsburg, you know, it's a big psychological step forward. You know, but they're happy, you know, because it's, you know, it's what's happening, but, you know, the gentrification, in my mind, is good if it has a moderate pace, because it's churn. It's just that when it comes in, you know, when it comes under the auspices of redevelopment and it just wipes out a whole neighborhood, that's not good. But, you see these neighborhoods, you know, it's just like a garden, you have to weed out and have new crops and stuff. But I understand Brooklyn, you know, I've been to Brooklyn, but I don't know, I can't say I know it, but I understand.
well, there's lots of different neighborhoods.
Right.
but The ones that are the nicest have, you know, one or two main blocks, you know, with multiple, fortunately, they have lots of row houses,
Yeah.
which have been great, and then you've got a block of business with apartments upstairs, but it's mainly restaurants.
Right.
You know, most clothing stores, those kind of things.
Nail
are pretty-
salons?
Huh?
No nail salons?
Oh, yeah, there are some
Usually
nail
there's
salons.
6
There
or
are
8.
nail,
There's
yeah, there are
usually
nail
6 or 8
salons.
salons.
Yeah, there are nail salons.
Yeah, they are
A
fun.
few liquor stores, you know,
Yeah.
but
All the
You know, it's funny.
all the essentials.
Retail is, you know, we've talked about
Yeah,
it, we know how
it's gone.
it's gone, but it's, you know, it's coming back in a way too, you know, when you see like Carhartt clothing, you know, everyone knows Carhartt, the work
Mhm.
clothes. Now they're making, they're starting to have their own stores more and more. They're not trying to compete with the internet, it feeds their internet, they just need to have, be more visible, it's kind of like the Apple Store, they have to have the visibility. You know, but restaurants, and doing activities are the ones that come into these places, you know. Cowie's is not a restaurant, right?
Well, can I just,
Yeah.
going back to downtown business, historically, I know East Hampton has lower commercial business square footage rates than you look at Northampton.
Sure.
It's higher than Holyoke, higher than Springfield. And my question to you, committee, as you're doing this, is like, how does removal of downtown business, how does removal of first floor spaces increase the rents? and who benefits, you know? If, right now, we have a lot of first-time entrepreneurs coming into East Hampton because they can't get storefronts in Northampton, or they're, you know, they wanna, you know, we have a butcher shop that just opened up. Does that kind of thing happen when the rents start to go up because there's less availability? Ideally, we don't have vacancies, and we have, you know, cheap enough rents that people can take risks and do things like that. But how would this affect rental rates and supply and demand of that? And that would be something that I would want the community to think about as the EIC, because it's not, there's.
Right, don't want to price business out. No,
Well, lack of availability can cause, I mean, in a desirable area, it can cause prices to go up. But one of the problems is, I thought we're talking about housing, lack of housing, especially downtown, affordable housing, and startup companies, startup businesses, young entrepreneurs need a place to live and a place to operate a business. So that's how I think it would help.
And I also don't think that just, if this change were to happen, it doesn't mean that when we turn the page on 2017, that all the storefronts in East Hampton will be filled. It doesn't mean that they're gonna all get rented in a matter of a short period of time. It just means we can attract a different model, if you will, to some of them. They're not gonna all get rented, and it doesn't preclude the full-blown business going in, I assume. It just gives another option. So the butcher shop could still go into, you know, the building on Union Street, but if it was going to be a restaurant or an art gallery or something where the person lived in the back, that's another option.
So is the conversation just about owner occupied or business occupied? Like, if you have a storefront, you can live in the back? Or is the question that a property owner can rent? I mean, this,
The
again.
front out, you mean live in the back and rent the front or something like that?
Well,
or-
no, I mean, I'm just trying, like,
Yeah, is the
if I
business tied
if I own a building
Yeah.
on Cottage Street,
That's a good point.
can I rent the first floor to anybody, or can only I live there? Because that's two very different
Right.
things, you know.
Well, I think it'd be rental units,
Part of
just
the-
like a storefront.
Well, and
With
so,
an apartment,
under
efficiency
a
apartment.
home occupation ordinance, you can only have a home-based business if you live on that property. You
Well,
don't
that's
have.
that's the home
Right, but
occupancy.
so this is.
Right.
Are we talking about the inverse of that? If you have a business, you can live in that
Yes.
accessory, but
But the
only,
business owner
only.
rent it to someone else.
But-
Well, that was my thinking, is that there would be units that would be available for people to live on location and have a storefront right there on the street.
That's the assumption I was going
It
with.
follows
Well,
an older
that's a
model.
very different, I think
I
that's a
know,
very
but
different.
I wasn't going to the assumption, like, so just take a storefront, 1,000 square feet, 600 was gonna be storefront, and 400 is gonna be a residence. That, me being landlord, I rent the storefront to Josh, he does computer, he does well, and then you need an apartment, I rent an apartment to you. That's not the model I was thinking of. I was thinking of Josh is gonna live there to run his business.
So you're renting the
So
whole
it's- so
1,000
renting the whole
square feet to
1,000.
the same person?
Yes.
Correct, that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
I mean,
as well.
I think that's a very different proposal than, those two proposals are very different.
Well, that's how I was thinking it, because.
One was a subdivision. and
Well,
one was-
one's giving flexibility to someone to say, rather than you to pay rent for your residence, and you need to pay rent for your storefront, it's allowing you to say, you can have a live-work situation if you, that there's some flexibility for a
Yeah.
live-work situation in first floor. But that's very different than just anybody.
Are you a little more comfortable with that?
When you say different better or different worse?
I see that as different better, because it's unlikely, in my point of view, it's unlikely to have an impact of, you would only be able to live there if you're working in the front of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to take up, most people aren't going, you know, the existing storefronts, they're not gonna just say, okay, well, I can
Yeah,
make
chop
this
it in
space,
half,
chop this
chop it in
space in
half,
half,
yeah, chop it in
and
half.
raise, and it's gonna raise the rents
Right.
and
Right.
having separate.
The zoning would have to preclude Josh from buying the building and saying, I've got someone who's interested in a 600 square foot space for business, and I've got someone else interested in a 400 square foot apartment. And so he's gonna be the landlord, and landowner, and he's gonna rent it to two different people. The zoning would have to restrict that and say it's gotta be one and the same.
Yeah, and
Right,
just-
and that's similar to what we do for home occupations, which
So,
is.
so
which
work,
is-
live,
it's-
space.
it's- You have to live on the property
Yes.
Right.
in order to have a home you can't just, I wanna open up a retail store in R40 and
Right.
live in Northampton.
And I think all I'm saying, Jamie, is that flexibility may attract some unique options to the downtown that aren't there today. It won't fill them all up overnight, but it allows some alternative to, you know, nail salon going in, or what have you, just putting in another business. There'll be some uniqueness to it, I think,
Yeah.
when it's a owner occupant residential business. I think it's kind of neat.
the other thing
And
is,
it seems like it would hardly, I mean, like, it's, the people who are looking for residential places, correct me if I'm wrong, mostly have, you know, they're looking for an apartment, they're not
I know, but
looking for an apartment.
the thing with the
plus a
artist
storefront.
community though,
But
if an artist community had a chance,
Yeah,
You do see this a lot in the arts with the,
Right,
with the live workspaces
Yeah.
and,
in my mind, if, I don't know, I'm gonna say three, but just say, if 3 to 5 of those types of spaces were built, were created throughout the whole, well, not the downtown zoning, but what we refer to as a downtown, basically, I guess, Mill at 180 to the butcher shop. If 5 of those spaces were created, you know, it'd be a plus. You know, I don't see 50
right.
50 artists
No.
coming in and living and working in the same spot. I just, you know, I mean, I think that's
And that
how.
would probably be okay if they were, because I don't see, it. I don't see that scenario where live work is taking over the entire downtown or.
Correct.
no.
But I do think that there
Right.
would need to be restrictions on how much of that space could be.
Oh, yeah, we gotta hammer that out. I mean,
And that's something that, like, I think the planning board would probably, you know, I don't know what the proposal would be, how detailed to make the proposal, but.
it's gotta be user friendly for chat.
Right. Well, they've been doing their proposals and
Yeah.
their, you know.
The more we do, the less they'll have to give it away, right?
Right.
And I think, I just wanted to say something about the flexibility. I thought about the flexibility really has more to do with people who own the empty storefronts right now. What can they do with them? They're trying to find somebody to fill the storefront. The flexibility comes in with the property owner being able to know that, well, they can create this unique environment, this experience for somebody. And convert, that's the flexibility. But and then people looking for, that we had a shortage of rental units, and there might be those people out there wanting to live here and saying, wow, man, this is
And
this is 2 in 1. I mean, it's
flexibility is
great.
important. Like our new buildings that we're building, you know, they're, you know, this first floor is office, commercial. So anyway, the traditional, you know, when you take, it'd be like 2 1,500 square foot units. That's not a very, desired space. So we're just gonna make it, we're gonna make, like basically 4 or 5 offices around 500 square feet. But they can, the wall can come down, or the walls are jointed, there's communicating doors, so, you know, if one person wanted, you know.
To expand.
Right, but, you know, we have new construction, it's easy for us to do that, but the flexibility, so if somebody wants to have one whole, you know, traditional 1,500 square feet, more power to you. Now, we lose a little flexibility that we don't have the open floor plan, but we're responding to the market right now, and what we've noticed is that smaller office spaces, broadly defined, meaning 250 square feet to about 700 square feet, are easier to rent than 1,000, 1,200, or 1,500. Then you get to the problem when a guy wants to expand, but whatever, you know, it's just, you can't do everything, but, yeah, that's right. But, you know, so, But,
So
yeah,
are we good with you doing the draft?
I don't know, eh?
Yes.
We're good.
Alright. So, since it's 4:48, over 55, I appreciate the comments that Casey brought about it, but we'll flush that out some more
Hmm.
in the future. And then,
Has all this been under the PDPC?
No, 6, under,
Under the, oh, that's what I thought.
yeah. And number 7, I don't have anything to say at the moment. I appreciated Jessica's comments last time, but I like to push that forward, but I didn't think about it at all between 2 meetings. If anybody else has, it's wonderful.
It's the,
PDPC.
Yeah.
I should just,
Yeah.
because one thing I said to myself last meeting is, okay, take out the report, we read it.
well, the thing is so the guys cleaning my beer line, and I'm ordering a bunch of wood to do some decking, and I tell them I gotta get a building permit, yada, yada. Oh, they're just wanna hitch up for the taxes or whatever, the fees. And I said, well, I think, what I understand is that the cities and towns are trying to make the building departments sort of pay for themselves because they're a cost to the city and they're a service. And I said, for me, there's the cost of doing business. And that it's sort of like, otherwise you're gonna get taxed for those hours that the building inspector does and all those things. So
Yeah.
to get those fees up to what they should be compared to other communities, it's not a bad thing. Once people start to understand
Right.
the balance of what the city's trying to do, it's like, we have,
Building,
Yeah.
we're talking about the PB,
Yeah, what are we talking about?
report?
Yeah, how, what
Yeah.
are we, how,
Because that
I'm
was,
looking
that
for
was,
Susan.
that report was specifically with regard to the industrial zoning. I don't think
Okay,
it had
that was
anything
about
to
the
do with.
permitting
Well, it was
costs.
about the cost of, they mentioned there the cost of the special permit,
Okay.
the fee for a special permit, which is separate from a building permit or,
Okay.
But you're right, Casey,
But yeah.
that's something that's really, something I work with all the time, and I'm working in a department where we just adopted new fees, and some contractors are complaining because they were increased, but then there was a deduction for online permitting to create incentives for using that
Less man
system.
hours and.
Right, and it's also automatically, uploads most of the material already in digital format and stores it, so we don't have to store so much paper. But there's this, this kind of ongoing discussion that touches on what you just brought up. If a department really should support itself with the fees, just like road use taxes, we pay for, people who drive cars pay for the fuel tax, the plates and everything. People who don't have them really shouldn't be paying for all the roadways, Same with building, but then the conversation and the debate goes to, yeah, but business and building is really important to cities, and everybody should bear the load. We should make it, more affordable for that kind of economic growth. But I'm on the side of saying, have the departments, the people who are doing the stuff pay the fees. That they're gonna pass it on to the people who
Well,
use their
see,
services.
one problem is all the
anyway.
contractors don't do their homework, and then they see the fee, but you're right, all contracts should be a price for the work plus permitting.
Yes.
And permitting, I found too that, especially when it's on a contract, and then later on, when an issue arises as an insurance issue, it benefits the homeowner.
Yes.
It- that you went through the process, you paid the fee, and you were signed off on, then that means it's the whole thing shifts to, the responsible party. The departments it's kind of funny, because the departments should be self-sustaining, but it does go in the general fund, so it does help the city.
Mhm. There is an arrangement at state level, you can adopt where you make it like enterprise fund kind of
Yeah.
operation. It involves more paperwork initially, but it gives you more control over, instead of a building department begging the town or the mayor for a new vehicle, you have the money set
Right.
aside and you buy your own vehicles as you need them. You run it like a business. You can do that. Most people don't though, because of
Yeah. Well,
East Hampton is set up as all the building fees go in the general fund, and then the building department gets submits a budget, the mayor approves the budget, city council approves the budget, and that's separate, so the fees come in and the budget is
I
set.
never see them, you know.
And planning department, same with the planning board application fees or zoning board application fees are all general fund.
But getting back to the churn, it's important, our three buildings, the building permit is $12,000. I mean, you know, it's a one-time hit, but it goes to the city, I mean, you know, so.
For an apartment building, R3, is that what you?
The three buildings I'm building in Northampton Street.
Oh, I see, the
you
three
know,
buildings.
Each building, their
Right,
permit
I
is
see.
$4,000.
Okay.
So, you know, the city's gonna receive $12,000, you know, one time, but it's,
But ongoing tax revenue.
well, right, but it's,
It buys you insurance.
but the churn is creating the money. I mean, if you didn't have any activity, you wouldn't be getting the permit fee.
Exactly.
And whatever the rate is, it's, you know, you're not gonna get a rate, if you don't have any activity.
Right.
So, all right,
Do that.
any other new business?
Just for those interested, right here at 50 Basin, Sunday is Big Rig Day.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Bring the kids down to play on the big trucks.
I'll be in New Orleans.
Oh.
New Orleans, huh?
Yes.
Oh, good for you.
Well, I thought the downtown business cleanup went well by the National Fund.
I did too.
You know,
I'm
I
very
thought it
glad.
went well, they seem to get a little bit of press, and they seem to have a
They
few projects they're gonna complete a little
Yeah,
bit
they
later.
complained about the
but-
parking lot on Cottage Street, which I cleaned last year, and I can attest to the fact it was pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
Nips and, yeah, it was nasty.
But yeah, it
Yeah.
seemed to go well, so I was happy to see that.
I was hoping that years ago, and you know, I know we talked about it once with Stuart, I was hoping that, the Cottage Street parking lot would have like a, you know, adoption drive.
Yes, yeah,
And,
it needs it.
I think, I don't mean to be critical, over the years, like, I know I've seen Doug, you know, from Manhan out there himself doing things, but, you know, I know how things work, if, you know, like, why should I go if they don't go, all that kind of stuff, you know, but, it's amazing what, you know, I find nips everywhere.
Well, I do
Yeah.
too. On my mailbox on
I'm like-
Loudville.
Why would somebody fly so far when they're empty? I don't
I
know.
have a new appreciation for trash, living just in throwing distance from Hoyle Street.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what people just,
Yeah.
I don't know where they think it goes when they throw it out the car window.
Mm.
Where do they think it
Out the window,
goes?
they don't want it.
Well, I laughed the other day,
The
I.
mountain breeze
It's not
does
in
go
my
in
car.
this
I
certain
guess it's not in my
direction
car,
too.
so it's out of
And I
sight.
know, she goes, what are you picking up? I says, well, I know it doesn't work, but it's a foam, does it sell foam? I'm like, I'm just gonna throw it away, but I'm like, obviously, yeah, it must have been.
Somebody-
I'm just like a penny for every cigarette butt.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, I'm gonna double check, but I think, what the hell is it? The 20th is the third Tuesday of June.
I can't make that meeting, just
Why?
so you know.
What do you
I
mean, why?
have it to-
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, I have a note, I do, I got a lot of notes, I got a whole list
Yeah.
of dates, or
Okay,
I can't
well,
do
Gail-
anything on those dates,
Gail's not
so.
gonna help us out, we're on our own. So we'll have a meeting, we'll see you guys on 6/20.
Sounds good.
Well, just in
Okay.
case you need
And I'll
for
have
it,
a
I gotta
draft.
call someone else.
And,
Well, thank you, I move we adjourn.
yeah,
Second.
all right, guys.
Come just for that.
Okay, I'll show you something.
Me? Gonna show me something? What do we got, the same phones?
This is an app.